So welcome back, everybody. After lunch, now we go to some different format. Jonathan Payne will present platform and digital tokens. We're very grateful for Jonathan to put this together. The first time we were presenting that, or he's presenting that, and so he gives you his insights to you about the new forms of money and how to think about it. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll point out, Marcus, you are also cited there. So it is the pair of us. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for staying towards the end of the Saturday. I guess it's been a long week for you guys, but I hope you'll enjoy this presentation. So what we're going to talk about is a bit different to what you've been talking about so far in this Princeton Institute. We're going to talk about platforms and digital tokens. So I'm going to do this in the following way. So we're going to start with more of a broader discussion about the potential roles of digital currency. That's building off, in particular, a paper that Marcus wrote with some co-authors. And then after that, I'm going to take you through a simplified version of the model Marcus and I are working on to try to understand what's going on with sort of platforms and issuing digital tokens. And I'm going to try to make that interactive a little bit. So I'll invite you to critique the model as we go, and hopefully we can get some discussion going about how we might model this kind of new technology. Okay. And overall, the goal here is to start you thinking about some new ways of modeling currency creation or currency supply. All right. So let's get going then. So I think it probably doesn't need too much introduction that there's been a lot of recent discussion about the possibility of digital currencies. In fact, now that I've started working on it, it's hard to open the newspaper and not see something on central bank digital currencies or some new kind of digital currency that's come up. And so I think, the reason for all the discussion is there's a lot of feeling that there's a revolution going on in money and payment systems. This revolution has a number of elements. We see large-scale data processing and monitoring, or AI or machine learning, or whatever you want to call it, changing the ability to monitor people and to record data. We see new matching technologies emerging, so platforms are better able to match buyers and sellers or lenders and borrowers, which is opening up new markets. And we see the emergence of different types of companies into the financial service space. In particular, we see tech companies and retail platforms and social media platforms starting to provide financial services. And all of this has led to new payment products over the past, broadly 15, 20 years. We've seen digital wallets and peer-to-peer transfers. Here in the US, we've seen PayPal and then Apple Pay and Venmo and etc. And then we've also seen new currencies emerge. So we've seen a lot of coverage of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum. We've also seen social media platforms like Libra try to launch well, I think somewhat unsuccessfully, try to launch new digital currencies. And there's been recently a lot of discussion about the possibility of central banks issuing their own digital currencies. So I think it's sort of it's a much discussed area because potentially a big change. So I want to open with a question for you guys, a slightly more high level question. I guess from reading the schedule, you've been doing maths with Yuli all morning. So I'm going to ask a higher level question for you to step back a bit. And I want to know what you guys think, where you think digital currencies will have some impact in the economy, if at all. You can also make the case that they're not going to have an impact if that's what you feel. So I'm going to open with a high level question. So what do you guys think? I don't require the hand. You can unmute yourselves and talk.
Well, my opinion is if not in a foundational or a fundamental way, in the way of supplanting, our monetary system, at least the digital currencies will help in improving things like microfinance or access to finance, and just removing frictions for people with who have lack of access of conventional banking system or conventional resources as such.
I see. So a difference in cost in some sense and the ability to serve a different part of the market. Fair enough. What else? Who else has some thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this is Kaushik here. So I think digital currency, in a way, there are different way of looking into digital currency, right?
Sure.
One way you say.
Are you on mute? I can't hear you anymore. Was that the end of the comment, or? I feel like we got a little bit into the comment and then it cut out. I guess we can go to a different person. Who else has some thoughts? It's not a maths question. You can answer without mathematics.
Remittances, for example, so international flows.
Sure.
Easier for people to access, kind of being able to transfer money across borders.
I see. So yeah, also this idea that there's an extra part of the market that can be served. Fair enough. Okay.
How about monetary policy? The effects of this currency on monetary policy, and how does it impact the ability of government to use the usual monetary policy tools at its disposal?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And we're sort of heading in that direction in this project, in the sense that there's a lot more competition, right? So you have all these other private currencies competing with the government currency. It gives them less room potentially to try to extract signage revenue, for example, or less freedom over their monetary policy. So that's certainly true. And that's sort of going to be a bit in the direction we're going to head in this project. Okay, so these are all good comments, I think, and particularly the last one, I think that's a little bit the direction where we're going to head here. Although in slightly more detail on the IO side. So I think the focus Marcus and I have really taken to thinking about digital currencies is two main things. One is the sort of rebundling of money services with platform services. So in particular, we see different kinds of private firms or platforms trying to provide this money, and this offers a different kind of synergy they can potentially get. So we want to think about that issue, right? How does a platform make money out of issuing or earn profit out of issuing its own currency? And the second theme we really want to pick up in this project is we want to think about the idea that platforms have greater control over digital currencies in the sense they're better able to monitor, restrict, and I've got punch there, but I mean punish. I guess it's sort of a similar thing, punish usage. So I think the broad idea here is that when we think about modeling money, there's a whole bunch of things we often think about as environmental frictions, like how liquid is a currency or how widely accepted is a currency in trade. And I think that when we move to thinking about digital currencies, many of these things we previously thought about as environmental frictions really become strategic choices of firms or platforms as they decide, do they want to impose exit costs? How difficult do they want to make it to use the currency outside of the platform or other currencies on the platform? And so a lot of these things that we think of as environmental frictions in macroeconomics are actually much more IO problems, strategic choices. And so I think the approach of this paper is to think about money provision much more as an industrial organization problem by a platform that's trying to maximize profits broadly and sees the ability to provide private currencies as part of that profit-making activity. Okay. By the way, I should have said at the start, I'm happy for people to interrupt with questions. I have scheduled questions, but I know it's hard over this format, but I'm happy for you to interrupt with questions if you have questions. And I'm not monitoring the chat. Marcus is not so welcome to interrupt with questions.
No, I just want an administrative point. If you want to conduct a poll, ABC, a generic poll, I can always launch one.
Oh, okay, all right. No, I think I'll try to get some discussion. We'll see how we go. I know it's hard over this format. All right. Yeah, go for it.
So when I see this problem, I also think about that there would be a divide between firms which can indulge in such kind of practices because everyone will not have the access or the ability to carry out these kind of digital currency things. So do you also address these kind of questions here?
What do you mean by the ability to carry out? So, I mean, in the end, this model is going to have it's going to be a choice whether they want to issue the currency or not. But at the moment, we don't really have a sort of currency production technology, which is a good question, right? And that's sort of a very reasonable extension of the model that we have. But at the moment, we don't have something like that, like a physical technology for currency production. But it is a choice in the sense of whether they want to try to extract profit from their trading advantage by issuing a currency or not is a choice the platform makes.
Okay.
So sort of a big picture question, jumping in quick here. So we saw earlier with the lecture by Marcus on the fiscal theory of price level and a few other models that, and just trying to relate your IO framework to a currency style framework, because if you have companies issuing their own currencies and so on, if other people don't want the currency, then basically it boils down to something a frequent flyer mile or a loyalty program kind of a thing. So how do we generally generate this sort of double coincidence of bonds in these kind of settings?
Yeah, so it's a good question, big question. So, so certainly, I guess relative to, I think the models you would have seen. So this is going to be a model. So I guess the way I think about modeling money is most models of money involve some kind of insurance against idiosyncratic risk. It could be idiosyncratic capital risk, for example, like you've had in some of the talks through this series. But here it's really going to be idiosyncratic liquidity risk. And holding the money is really providing the insurance against that kind of risk. In terms of the double coincidence of wants, that question is potentially in the framework, but actually we're really switching the focus, at least in what we're going to do today. The focus is not going to be so much on whether one agent in the economy wants to accept currency from another agent in the economy, but it's going to be more a question of which currencies is the platform going to allow to trade on the platform. So at least for I think really for most of what we're going to do today, that's the primary question we're going to go after. So in some sense that switches the question from being the kind of double coincidence of wants question from these money search models about, if you have a whole lot of kind of Roman coins floating around and do people want to accept them? It's sort of switching that to the idea that there's infrastructure in the economy and firms control that infrastructure and they're making decisions about what currencies they allow to trade. And that's the decision we're trying to go after here. Does that make sense? There's a bit of a shift in the focus of the sort of liquidity, quote unquote, decision. But you'll see that as we get to the model. Okay. So I think we kind of already got here in some sense. Like this approach is going to raise a lot of the questions which you guys are raising right now, which is really good. So the first question, the one we're really going to talk about today, is this IO question. So how will a platform design / manage digital currencies? To what extent are they going to, grow the currency stock to try to get signage? How do they impose entry and exit costs? Do they want to subsidize trading with markups or not markups? That's the sort of IO question we're going to go after today, and we'll build a model and do some sort of critique of that and think about how to extend it. The bigger picture questions that we're not going to have time to get to today are questions about, for example, which digital currencies would emerge as dominant, right? The idea you might have a digital currency area, which is getting back to some of the questions that were asked earlier about, well, which currency would emerge as the dominant digital currency? And going back to the question that was, I can't see your names, but anyway, it was asked earlier about, well, would everybody want to issue a digital currency? Well, some may leave it to others. And then there's this central bank digital currency question. We're not going to do regulation, although we'll talk a little bit about how having central bank digital currency would affect the platform IO decision. Okay, so that's sort of the roadmap for what we're going to think about. If you're interested in digital currencies, just a few quick references. I mean, there's been a wave of recent papers. I think a lot of them, though, do focus particularly recently on this central bank digital currency question, particularly this Keister's paper and Piazzesi's recent paper. We're really focused here on private digital currencies, and we want to think about them with platforms. So I think that's somewhat different to what they've been doing. And then broadly, there's been a push to try to have more of an industrial organization approach to finance. And you can see that in some of those papers there. And yeah, so if you're interested in that more broadly, but I think a lot of them don't focus on sort of money specifically, which is what we're thinking about in this project. Okay. All right, so let's have a look at this model then. So this is a simplified version of the model we're working with. So I think let's dig into it. So we want to focus on the firm's IO decision, as we've talked about. So we're going to start with a simple, it's going to be a partial equilibrium model. And we want to use it to illustrate the trade-offs that the platform faces when they decide how to undertake token issuance. And we'll think about, what are the limitations if they commit to a stable coin where they fix the price to some other currency, for example, the dollar. And we'll think about CBDC, a little bit about CBDC, although that'll be at the end. I don't know how much we'll get to. And along the way, we're going to use a discrete choice model here for sort of choosing a sort of network, if you like. So along the way, we'll discuss a few kind of discrete choice sort of tools and tricks that are useful for trying to deal with this kind of model. All right. So roughly what's the model going to look like?
Jonathan, one question
go for
from my side. So have you looked into digital currency as a new form of funding tool? Like, we have debt and equity. That's how, firms raise funding, right? The ICOs might be a new form of funding. And the way regulations are moving is that regulators are recognizing different currencies as not as a currency, but as a securities, right?
I think
so is there...
Sorry, there's a lag. Have you finished or?
Yeah, so is that something there in your model already?
That's not going to be in the model today because the platform doesn't really have a balance sheet. It's there in the sense that they're going to extract profit from signage, and ultimately, that's what IPO financing is, right? You're going to print money to finance the company, right? But it's not that they're going to have to print money to make some, say, capital investment, and that brings up a balance sheet, and then they're managing the balance sheet. So I'm not going to have the balance sheet management problem. I think in terms of this setup, yes, there was so that is one issue we've thought about, this IPO. I think the other one that's interesting here is sort of the use of collateral. So again, it's not exactly what we're going to get to today, but yes, I think that there's a lot of literature thinking that there's sort of scarce safe assets, and at least for the people operating on a platform, the platform has a very unique ability to create sort of safe assets as collateral for that platform. And I think that's the second way in which you would see this sort of macro role, I think, potentially. And yes, both those things we have in mind, but they're not going to be in the model we do today. Okay, so no, the model we do today is the simplest case. So we're going to start with a world that it has a supply chain. So there are intermediate goods, and then they're used to produce final goods. And then there are going to be firms, and the difficulty, well, the firms have two difficulties really. One is they have to search for trading opportunities in the supply chain, and they can search on the privately owned platform or away from the platform, which I'm just going to call the normal world or the non-intermediated world. So that's one difficulty. And then the second difficulty is that firms are exposed to the risk that they may not be able to use the currency they hold for payment when they get the trading opportunity. So what we're going to do today is that the currency cannot be traded when they're in the supply chain purchasing inputs. So this is like the extreme case when the platform can completely control which currencies are used as payment. So in some sense, the platform is completely choosing to the extent to which there's a cash in advance constraint. If you wanted to generalize this, which we're not going to do today, you could think about some bid-ask spread, or I think maybe more realistically, you could think about the issue that there's aggregate risk to when you want to be on a certain platform, and so the price of currency might move against you when you want to trade. But for today, we're thinking about a situation where once you're in the supply chain and you're purchasing, you can't trade in the external market, so the platform really controls which currencies can be used as payment. And so given that, the platform has a lot they can do. So the platform has a trading advantage, and they're able to monetize that through entry and exit costs, through markup on platform trades, or through signage by printing money. We're gonna think about how they'll make that decision. Okay. So what does this environment look like? So maybe unsurprisingly, given all the things you've done so far in the course, this is going to be a continuous time infinite horizon model, like I think most of the things you've seen. The environment is going to be that there are two types of goods. There are these intermediate goods, which we'll denote as sort of X goods. And then there are these final consumption goods, which we'll think of as, we'll term sort of Y goods. And then there are going to be a continuum of firms. And these firms are either going to be intermediate good producers or final good producers. And they're going to have to try to meet in the market and trade. And the extent to which it's partial equilibrium is we're not going to model households for now. So the firms are just going to consume wealth. But obviously, in the general model, we work with general equilibrium. Okay. So what is this production technology then? Well, these intermediate goods producers slash sort of entrepreneurs in this setup, they live for infinitesimal time intervals, so short-lived producers. In the instant, they can produce intermediate goods according to a decreasing returns to scale technology and labor. And here they provide their own labor at some disutility rate 1. And they get no utility from producing the intermediate goods. They need to trade them. They need to trade them with the final goods firms for wealth, and then they get utility from wealth. Obviously, this is the partial equilibrium version of the GE model, where these intermediate goods firms would hire labor and then pay out dividends to households. So that's the intermediate goods side, right? So that's where the curvature is in production in this model. It's in the intermediate goods producers production function. Then there are the final goods producers or entrepreneurs. So these final goods producers, they enter with average wealth and they hang around and they die at some rate. And they have a linear production technology. So they can turn these intermediate goods into final goods. They can sell them in an exogenous market for price PY. And while they're waiting to trade, they have this discount rate rho, and they also get linear utility from consuming wealth. Again, in GE, they would sell the final goods to households and pay dividends to households by just trying to keep the problem as simple as possible. So the platform problem is very interpretable for this talk. Okay, and then the final thing is we're going to choose sort of entry rates of the intermediate goods producers and the final goods producers to keep aggregate wealth and the total amount of X good trades at unity, so we have a stationary model. Again, this is so we can get a very clean characterization of what these trade-offs for the platform look like. All right, that's our production technology. Then the sort of heart of the difficulty here is in the matching between the intermediate goods producers and the final goods producers. So the trading in the intermediate goods market is frictional in the sense that they have random participation. So there are two markets for intermediate goods. I'm going to use N for the markets and J for the currencies. So there's two markets. There's the N is equal to 0, which is the normal non-intermediated market, not run for profit, right? You just go there, you trade. It's perfectly, there's no optimization involved. Alternatively, they can go to the private platform, and the private platform is run privately to maximize profits. And the platform is able to choose a number of things, right? They're able to choose the markup on the platform price. It's going to be a proportional markup. They're able to choose a penalty on using currency 0 on platform 1. It's like an entry cost. And they can also choose a penalty for using currency 1 on platform 0, so an exit cost, right? So they have these costs, so they can impose some penalty on how difficult it is to use a certain currency on the platform. That's in the sense in which they're kind of almost directly choosing how liquid the currencies end up being, at least with respect to their part of the market. Okay. And then the difficulty with these markets is the firms, they can only trade at random times, right? And this is where the advantage of the platform is going to come in. So each instant, each firm sees the rate at which they're going to be able to trade on each platform, right? So they get an idiosyncratic draw of a rate. Well, so they have a rate, lambda ni, right? It has two components. One part is going to be an idiosyncratic component, and the other part is going to be specific to the market they're going to. Right? And this idiosyncratic component, that's going to be drawn from a Fréchet distribution, so we can exploit the useful tools of the discrete choice literature. And this is going to generate the idiosyncratic risk. This is what plays the role of kind of liquidity risk, right? Where you don't know exactly when you're going to get the trading opportunity. You don't know exactly, which platform is going to look really good, right? So this is the idiosyncratic risk, and that's why it's going to generate the portfolio choice problem, where the firms are going to want to choose a mixture of currencies. Okay, so the firms see this rate, and then after this rate, they choose which market they want to search in, right? So they choose which market they want to look for the trading opportunity, and then, with a plus on rate lambda, they get this opportunity. Okay. All right. So just to make sure we're on board with how this market is working, I have the sort of flow diagram here where the arrows are referring to the flow of goods through the system. So we have these X good producers, which in GE would get labor from the household, but here don't. Oh, I see I've spelt labor the proper way, and it's corrected me as the wrong way. That's unfortunate. Anyway, that's the problem with not being American. You try to spell things correctly, and the computer shouts at you. Okay, so so they would normally hire labor, but here they're just providing their own labor, and then they choose whether they want to look for the trading opportunity in the normal market. Or in the platform, and they get different rates in the two markets, and Y good producers also get that, and then they have to decide where they go, and so we get this two-sided platform where both X good producers and Y good producers are choosing where they want to search for the trading opportunities. Okay, does this make sense?
Jonathan, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. Good time for a question.
So you said before that you're focusing on stationary equilibria, right? Can you be more explicit on what will be stationary in the model?
Oh yeah, so the things that could not be stationary, the main thing that could not be stationary is the wealth of the Y good producers who are searching in this market trying to buy inputs, right? And so yes, in general, the wealth of the Y good producers would be moving around. And that would make the end platform problem dynamic in the sense that they would have to decide how to optimally control the wealth of those Y good producers. But I'm adjusting here entry on both sides so we don't have that happening. Yeah, go. These are good questions. This is not because I think this is the optimal way to model it. It's really for illustrative purposes. I want to get a clean platform problem that we can look at.
Sure. So the follow-up question was just because you introduced the topic as kind of this thing that what happens if new digital currencies arrive, but you're not actually looking at this kind of new arrival story, right? You're just looking at this doesn't happen in your model, right? Where new currencies arrive, right?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought a lot about that question. Yeah. So that's not really the way I interpreted my intro, but that's a good point actually. So certainly that's something I could do here. Yeah. So yeah, you could think about a platform opening. So the stationarity, sure. So the stationarity I'm talking about is with respect to the demand, right? So it's with respect to the market. Oh, yeah. So it's the Y good producers and the X good producers. Even if you kept that assumption, you could still think about introducing, say, a third platform, for example, and think about then what happens. So I think that's a good question. That's something I should do because it would be a good exercise. I think it's a little bit disconnected to the question of whether or not you're allowing the wealth distribution of the Y good producers to evolve. I think that's really not the central question here, at least not to first order. Does that make sense?
So a quick question there, Jonathan. So the thing which is exogenous here is the rate at which the X good producers can go into either of the two markets, right? The rate.
This lambda n, right? or this, yeah. So the firms are getting a draw, right? They get a draw of the rate at which they're going to get trade. So it's like I see Amazon, I see eBay, I take a look, and on each of them I see a rate of trade, and then I choose where I'm going to go and try to buy, right?
Got it. And do we know about what the behavior of, so there are two currencies, one for each platform, right? That's the idea. And so there are frictions in the private platform that you cannot use currency zero and so on.
That's the choice. That's a platform choice. They're going to decide to what extent they allow that, right?
All right, got it.
Because this is the spirit of the exercise, trying to understand how this platform would allow currencies on it, right? But once you go to central bank digital currency, that's no longer a choice, right? They have to allow the currency, and that's going to restrict their options a lot. Okay, these are good questions.
Just another clarification question.
Yeah,
so
go for it.
Are X and Y good producers are they both choosing the markets, like which platform to go to simultaneously?
That's right.
And then they just go there and meet. Okay.
They go there and meet, yes. But at the moment, there's not okay, I'll get to comments about feedback in a second, right? So there's not feedback at the moment,
okay,
except for the price.
Hi, Jonathan. So can I ask a question?
Yeah, so it's on.
So
I recognize your voice.
Yeah. So can the platforms choose the matching frequency lambda, or is it exogenous?
No, it's a good question. So I think the first extension we really want here is that they have a technology over the lambda, and that maybe different platforms specialize in different types of goods, and that's where you can see these digital currency areas emerging. So I think the natural extension is that it's costly for the platform to get a lambda, and then that adds this extra IO dimension to their problem. And this is going back to the question that was asked. I wish I could see names. I don't know why I can't see names. Oh, there we go. Oh no. Why can I not see names, Marcus? Anyway, this was the question that was asked earlier about, are all the platforms able to issue currency? And at the moment, yes, there's no technology for getting the lambda or for the currency. And I think a very natural thing to add here is some kind of cost function for the platform of producing a lambda. And then you might see specialization where they get different trading rates in different goods. And they also get currency specializing as well. So I think it's a good question. And that's certainly where we want to go.
Okay, thanks.
Hopefully that will be there for the next talk at the macro lunch. Okay, so they're good questions. Okay, so then financial assets. So here we just have two financial assets. We have the government money, which is issued at a constant rate by the government. And there's also the platform money, which is issued at a rate by the platform. And markets are competitive, so participation is random, but once everybody enters the market, it's a competitive market. And so we have a competitive goods market and a competitive currency market for the people who are able to trade in. And so we do our usual trick and we deposit a process, and then we're going to work with it. There's an exogenous price of the end final good, which we're using as the numeraire in this model. Like in most of them, well, I guess you often use you probably use the total wealth numeraire thus far in the course, but sometimes you've used probably the consumption good as a numeraire, which is what's being used. Okay, so this is all sort of the same as what I imagine you've been seeing for the past few days. Okay, so I think I want to pause. I guess I've had some good questions already, but I just want to pause here for a second. So this is since this is sort of a modeling workshop, at least my part of it is, I want to pause here and think about, what are the other ways we could have used for modeling trading frictions? So I've chosen a very particular kind of setup here. What would be the other options, do you think?
You can have stablecoin kind of feature, right? So it is not like one currency; it is a basket of currency, right? That's how Libra is probably structuring themselves. So it is not a new currency, it is a basket of currency, right? And that creates a different friction.
I guess, so that's really like having a stable coin, right? So what Libra is doing is kind of pegging the currency to a basket of other currencies. The platform here can do that. They can choose to peg, they can choose to adjust supply to peg the price if they want to. I don't think they're going to want to do it, but they could do it. So I'm not sure that necessarily introduces a different way of modeling trading frictions. Thinking more like, think back to your first year PhD, you would have done a range of search models, for example, right?
You could have a two-stage process, right? Where you first choose the currency, and then once you've chosen the currency, you see everyone else who has a currency, and there's not a matching process per se. It's just that you can automatically trade with everyone who deals in the same currency.
Yeah, so more like you become part of a network, I guess, right? Is what you're saying. Yes, so that's, yeah, so, well, as Marcus well knows, that's the model we've had on the paper for most of the project, yes. So yes, so certainly that does introduce a lot of other issues though, right? Because once you have that question, there's actually kind of a long-term contracting question between the platform and the firms, because they have to think about how often the firms can re-optimize what network they're a part of. So this does introduce quite a lot of additional difficulties, although the interesting difficulties. I have a comment about this at the end of the presentation. I think they're just thinking about kind of ways
Jonathan.
of trading friction. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So to answer this question, by trading friction, we are asking what alternative ways would we have to make the platform useful? Because at the moment, you are making the platform useful by increasing the contact rate in a search problem. Another way could be to say that there are informational asymmetries in a market, and the platform is useful because, for instance, it gives you reviews, and this can lower the information asymmetry and create value to be on a platform.
Yeah, it's not on my slide here, but it's a good option. It's hard to model in a macro model to do this, although there are some good recent papers that sort of think about dynamic models where they have this information design problem so platforms with information design has been a recent area. So actually Nikhil Vallodi has a paper on that if you're interested. So I think, yeah, that is one way to go, but it's complicated. It was certainly significantly complicated from putting into a macro model. But yes, that's certainly a reasonable option. But yes, this is very much in the search mold. So in the search mode, you have different options, right? So,
but just one follow-up point. But that is more like reducing cost of verification, right? So that's something Marcus has in his survey literature, and there are some models on verification cost, and and this technology can reduce verification cost, right?
You could think about a reduction in verification. I think more sort of endogenous here would be to think about additional punishment. So I think if you want to go down that route, I think being part of a platform gives you access to additional punishment technology. Would be a more endogenous way of thinking about that point.
Okay, thanks.
I think on the search side, so I think we could do random search. I guess the similarity is random participation. I think the difference is here, I really want the agents have some choice about where they want to go. So in that sense, it's more like a directed search model. And we're not interested in bargaining. There's no bargaining in this model. Compared to directed search, so we also have this feature that agents are kind of choosing where they want to search. But the key feature of a directed search model is you have a congestion problem, right? So the trading rate in a directed search model depends on the ratio of buyers to sellers. So as more people go on to Amazon, it becomes harder for me to buy on Amazon. It's really the congestion that drives the market clearing in a directed search model. And we've shut down the congestion here. And I guess compared to sort of CES, I want to get a clearer notion of the platform trading advantage. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered some of these questions. I'm going to leave this slide in the interest of time because I guess time's getting away from me. Okay, so what do these agent problems look like? All right, so let's start with these X good producers. So the X good producers, they have to choose which platform they want to search in. That's this choice of N. And then conditional on getting the trading opportunity, they have to choose how much to produce, right? This is what pins down the amount of production in the economy. And so fine, so conditional on getting the trading opportunity, it's a pretty standard problem here, right? They're just maximizing decreasing returns to scale production function with labor choice. And so out of that, they get some profit, right? Oh, I see there, this should be an XN, that should be an XN in there. Okay, and so what happens? Well, the nice feature about using this discrete choice modeling, right, this Frechet distribution, is we get a very clean expression for what the value function ends up being. So when we take the expectation over the max choice, we end up with something that looks a bit like a CES aggregator, right? Where the value function of these X good producers is this sort of average or weighted average profit function times a constant, which is the gamma distribution evaluated at a certain point. And this CES sort of aggregator that comes out of this this discrete choice problem, it's the weighted sum, you know, where we raise to the power of psi, which was the parameter in the Frechet distribution, and then to the power of 1 over psi. And we're weighting by the trading rate and by the price on the platform, which is really the two things that are dictating which platform you want to go to, right? How quickly can you trade on that platform, and what does the price look like on that platform? And then we also get a very clean expression for the fraction of firms. I'm going to use these phi's for the fraction of firms that go to a particular market. So here, this is the fraction of firms that go to market N, and here we see it's basically a share of the weight between the trading rate and the price. Okay. All right. So just a quick note then. So I guess if you haven't seen these extreme value distributions before, maybe this looks a little bit mysterious. So since this is kind of partly an initiative to help you with some technical tools, just want to make a quick comment that about why these extreme value distributions are useful for these discrete choice problems. And so there's really three discrete choice distributions, or there's three extreme value distributions. There's the Frechet, the Weibull, and the Gumbel. And they all have nice features when you try to take the max of a collection of those variables. So if we think about the Frechet distribution, so if we have a Frechet distribution with parameter psi, and then a scale parameter A and a shift parameter B, right? It has a distribution that looks like this, right? The exponential power. And so for our problem, we had that the idiosyncratic part of your matching rate followed the Frechet distribution. And so once you scale by the profit you get and by the average trading rate on the platform, we still get a scaled Frechet distribution. And then the really nice thing about the Frechet distributions is the max, or at least in this case, the max of the Frechet distribution is still a Frechet distribution. So if we take the max of the sort of expected, the max of the weighted profit on the different markets, we end up with another Frechet distribution where the Frechet distribution is now scaled by this CES aggregator. And so if you're thinking about your own work, I mean, this has some nice properties. It's very clean. It's like a CES aggregate. And also it scales very well. We could have had an arbitrary number of platforms here and we would have got equally nice formulas. This is why the discrete choice literature uses these distributions so much when it wants to think about, you know, which network do you join, or which platform do you go to, or which country do you trade with, when it's a discrete choice kind of problem. Okay, so that's just a quick technical aside. Then we have the Y-good producers. So the Y-good producers are a little bit more complicated because they hold wealth and they have to choose where they want to hold the wealth, right? And the issue is that the different currencies have different rates of return, and they have different usefulness when you want to do the trading. That's what gives the trade-off for your portfolio choice. But I'm jumping a little bit ahead. So for these Y-good producers, we have their financial wealth, which is defined the same way as you have been for the past few days, right? It's the market value of all the monies they hold. And then we have their portfolio, which is the value of their the value of their money divided by their total financial wealth. Okay, so in this case, it's a dynamic problem because the agents are managing their wealth over time, right? And we have a sort of relatively standard looking HJB equation, right? So we get some drift term, right? So like you've been working with, we get some drift of your wealth. That's the, so here we have the drift in the price of the different monies, and then this is your share in the money, and multiplied by your marginal value of wealth, the same kind of term you've had in your previous classes. We also have some death rate where you disappear from the market. And then we have a similar term to the previous problem where they have to choose which market they want to be looking in all the time. And then conditional on getting the trading opportunity, they have to choose how much they want to buy. And here they have to choose how much they want to buy with each of the two currencies, because they potentially face a penalty for using a particular currency on the platform. And so when they actually make this trade, when they choose which, so this XNJ denotes this XNJ denotes the quantity of X goods purchased using currency J in market N, right? And the difficulty is sometimes there's a penalty if you use the wrong currency in the platform that's chosen by the platform. And so when these Y good producers are deciding where to purchase or how to purchase inputs, they end up with a profit, where the profit depends on how much they purchase using each particular currency, where they potentially have to pay some kind of penalty in addition to the price if they use the currency the platform doesn't want them to use. Okay, so this is the Y good problem, right? They have to choose a portfolio holding. Well, sorry, I'll start the other direction. They have to choose, once they get the trading opportunity, they have to choose how much of their money to use and how much of their platform tokens to use in purchasing. Stepping back a bit, they have to choose, okay, when they're waiting for the trading opportunity, they have to choose which platform, which market are they going to go to, the platform or the normal market. And then stepping back even further, they have to say, okay, given that the platforms may impose penalties on using the currency they don't like, they have to decide their portfolio choice about which currencies they want to hold. Okay. So this is the problem these Y good producers face. Okay.
Can I ask a very small modeling question?
Yes.
So why are you modeling this as why is there a penalty for choosing the wrong currency on a platform, but why instead of just modeling these as different platforms? I mean, what's the advantage of having a penalty of choosing the wrong currency on a platform versus modeling each currency as a different platform? Do you get my question?
Yes, because so this is the platform's choice about to what extent they're going to allow other currencies and to what extent they want to try to make their currency. So the platform here has a trading advantage. They're going to try to monetize it. They could say, look, I forget about having my own currency, right? I'm just going to use the other currency. I'm not going to impose any penalties on using the other currency. I'm just going to try to extract a big markup, right? So I'm going to try to get as many people to my platform as possible. And then I'm going to impose a big markup, and that's how I make profits. But we're opening up another opportunity for them here. They could also say, actually, I'm going to sort of restrict the amount of currencies that can be used. That means there's less trading on my platform, so I don't make as much money through the markup. But that makes my currency more valuable. It's going to increase the amount of transactions being done in my currency. And so the price of my currency is higher, and so I get more signage revenue. So this is the trade-off I'm trying to draw out for these platforms, right? The platform is choosing, in some sense, how liquid or how readily used the currency is in transactions. If it was one currency for each platform, they wouldn't have this choice.
I see, that's helpful.
And so, because I'm trying to get back to this question you asked at the beginning, actually, which is, would a platform actually issue a currency? And I'm giving them the choice here. They may not issue a currency, right? They may decide to let other platforms issue the currencies and just focus on a markup.
So Jonathan, a follow-up question to that. It makes sense for the platform to be able to decide the entry cost and the penalty, the markup.
Yes.
How can the platform also dictate the exit cost, or like, the usage of its token on the other platform?
Well, I think the usage of the token, so I've got two answers to that. So one is exit costs are pretty ubiquitous actually in digital currencies. In some sense, you might think that a lot of these cryptocurrencies are designed with high exit costs specifically to boost the value of them, is one interpretation of their business model. So I think in some sense, exit costs are quite ubiquitous. So that I think is definitely part of the strategic choice of currency issuers. The other question though about, okay, so how do you control the usage? That's a more open question. So a motivating idea in this project is that digital currencies, they always have to be recorded. And so a starting idea in this project was that if you issued a physical coin, right? You can use that coin without someone keeping a record of the coin usage. But that's not true with a digital currency. Someone somewhere has to be recording it. In fact, if it's a centrally controlled currency, the central controller has to be recording who owns the currency. So in that sense, the monitoring of trade is very different. And so one of the starting ideas in this project was that because the nature of digital currencies means you are always monitored, you have much greater control over the ability to impose exit costs on the currencies or restrict use of the currencies elsewhere than you otherwise would. This is part of this idea I started with at the beginning, that some of the things we thought about more as environmental frictions are now more like strategic IO choices of the firms providing the infrastructure. That's sort of the spirit of this project, to get away from thinking of it as like we're back in ancient Rome and we have a bunch of silver coins and they're trading, but what people do with them is of no, the person who issues the coin has no idea what happens to the coin afterwards. We're now sort of in this world, we have a lot of information. That was a long answer, but was it compelling?
It was compelling. Just one, quick comment, is that even necessary? Isn't the dimension of penalty cost and the entry cost enough to also control the amount of markup or the profit that the platform is able to make on its currency?
I think that's possibly true. I mean, in some sense here it's just simpler for this model, but yes, I think conceptually you might think that the exit cost is to some extent sufficient, although you might think that if you had multiple platforms being strategic, maybe you might want to specifically say, I don't want my currency used on platform X, right?
Right. You'll have this complete matrix of entry and exit costs.
Yeah, you could. And so, but you could model that as an exit cost to a specific platform. But I think my point was that you can always impose exit costs. The extra information, I think, with digital currencies is you can pose an exit cost to a specific platform, right? I think that's the part that I think is more new here. So maybe that's a better way of answering your question, right? Okay, I am running out of time. This goes to 3:15, right? Marcus, is Marcus disappeared?
Yeah. No, I'm still here.
It goes to 3:15, right, Marcus?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to
go to 3:20, but not much more.
Okay, yeah, but these have been good questions. In some ways, I'd rather have the discussion than have everyone silent, particularly given you've had so many seminars. But I'm going to jump ahead, given that we only have a few minutes left. Okay, so I want to jump ahead to. I'm going to jump ahead actually to the equilibrium. I think you have the sense of what's going on. So I think we've discussed some of these things. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the platform problem, and I will. It's Natalie next. I don't want to be mean to Natalie and take her time, so I will try to finish. Okay.
No, Chris Sims is next.
Well, even more reason to finish on time. You say that as though that would change my decision, Marcus, but quite to the contrary. Particularly since I'm being recorded. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the platform problem, right? So, okay, so the platform is choosing the markup on trading. So what we're thinking about here is there's a price received by the sellers, and there's a price that the buyers pay, and that's some additional var phi on top, right? So this is the markup. And they choose a growth rate of currency. I'm going to start thinking about the case where they impose exit and entry cost of 1. So you can only use the platform currency on your platform. It's like you're really restricting it, right? And then when the platform makes this choice, it's going to internalize the impact on equilibrium prices. So in this sense, we're going to get something that looks like a Ramsey problem, where the platform is choosing these particular instruments to try to maximize, in this case, its profit over time. Okay, so we need to think about these market clearing conditions. So we have the intermediate goods market. So the intermediate goods market is the total number of, so this is total supply, right? So this X, and then there's little x, these are the X good producers, right? So this is the supply to the market, and then these are the Y good producers these are the demand, this is the demand in the market. These are the ones buying the intermediate goods. And what's nice about the problem is we set it up with this discrete choice is we have these sort of nice expressions for the fraction of firms that go to a particular market. And in particular, I've even simplified this problem further because I've chosen entry and exit so that this total amount of trade is not a moving variable, right? So this is just normalized to 1 and we're adjusting entry and exit. So we get a very clean expression. So the total amount of trade is always the same. The platform is just trying to adjust how much of that trade happens on their platform as opposed to in the outside of their platform. So in this case, we actually get a pretty, despite what I think is in some ways a somewhat convoluted setup, we actually get a pretty clean expression for what this price ratio ends up looking like between the two different platforms. And then the other market we care about here is this money market. And this money market is well, it's the same money market clearing condition as you had in the previous part of the course. It's theta times wealth. So this is the demand for the currency, and then over here we have the supply, where M is the supply provided of the currency. And again, we've shut down the dynamic part in the sense that we don't have A moving around, and so we just have that theta is equal to the market value of money. Okay. So in that case, we actually get, at the end of all this, a somewhat tractable platform problem, right? The platform is deriving revenue from its markup, and it's deriving revenue from signage, right? Or if you wanted to generalize this from the question from earlier, this is really like the IPO revenue, right? They're printing money and they're getting profit from it, right? And they do that subject to the equilibrium conditions they internalize in the intermediate goods market and the money market. And subject to the portfolio choice of the agents. So we didn't get to do the portfolio choice of the agents in detail, but we have here so this here is the difference in the drift of the this here is the difference in the drift of the price of money 1 minus the drift of the price in money 0. But in this economy, because we've simplified things, the drift of the price is just the drift of the negative of the drift of the money supply. So we get a clean expression for this portfolio choice. We are weighing up essentially the difference in the growth rate of the money against over here, we have the marginal benefit of holding the currency when you get into trade, right? So it's a somewhat similar looking condition to what you had in the I theory, except that instead of the idiosyncratic risk being on capital, now the idiosyncratic risk is really on the chance you have the wrong currency when you want to trade. And that's something the platform controls. Okay. So I guess I'm really running tight on time. Okay, so we can simplify this problem a little bit. And in the end, once we get to the first order conditions here, we start to see these different impacts coming out, right? So we see that when they choose their growth rate of currency, yes, they get extra revenue from the currency issuance. That's partly offset by the fact that when you issue more currency, you decrease demand for the currency, and you decrease the price. That's the second term. But then we get this extra channel. Well, and if we look down here, if you increase the markup, yes, you get more revenue from the markup because you're charging a bigger markup on every sale. You also get this impact that if you charge a higher markup, fewer people go to your platform, right? So the first terms are the standard terms, right? I print more money, I see some adjustment in the price that partially offsets my signage revenue. and I increase the markup, that partially decreases trade, and so I get less revenue on my platform. But then we get these other terms. So we also see that when you choose your money supply here, and if you increase your money supply to try and generate more signage revenue, it decreases portfolio holdings of the currency. And yes, that decreases the price of the currency. That's this impact here. But if fewer people are holding the currency, that means it's less likely they're going to want to go to your platform, because it's hard to use the other currency on your platform. And so it also decreases your markup revenue. And likewise, if you try to generate more markup revenue by increasing the markup, yes, that decreases trading volume, that's the standard thing, but it also means that because fewer people are trading on your platform, that means fewer people are holding your currency because they don't think they're going to go to your platform, which decreases the price of your currency and your signage revenue. So we see here this integration between the IO problem, thinking about optimal markups to maximize your markup revenue, and this money printing problem, this signage problem, right? These two things interact in the way you want to do it. And in some sense, the firms have a choice. They can kind of specialize in saying, look, I really don't care about the signage revenue. I just want to get a lot of trading on my platform, right? And so in that case, what I would do is I would forget about trying to extract signage. I'd allow maximum trading on my platform, and then I would try to get a high markup. Alternatively, the firms could go to the strategy of saying, well, I'm not going to allow everybody on my platform, but I really want to get this signage revenue. So I'm going to make it hard to use other currencies on my platform to try to give my currency a lot of value, and then I get my signage revenue. So these are the two strategies you have as a firm. Okay, so I think I got 1 minute. Marcus said to 20 past. So just a couple of comments then on additional results. I'm not going to go through any maths here, but just to say, what happens if you introduce a central bank digital currency? Well, if you introduce a central bank digital currency, that really eliminates the platform's ability to exclude the government currency from the platform, right? You now have to allow it. You can't somehow only have your own currency accepted. And that really forces the platform to offer trading discounts if they want to make their money valuable, right? You're going to have to subsidize trading in the currency. So the presence of CBDC currency, central bank digital currency, makes it a lot harder to extract private digital currency revenue. It's going to shut it down. The second thing is that having a stable coin, there's this comment about Libra benchmarking to a basket. So we could do this here. So a stable coin would say, well, I'm going to set my price equal to the price of the outside currency. But that means that we have to have the same growth rate of money. So that means I get the same signage revenue as the government, right? So in other words, if you have a stable coin, you're pegging your profit from the currency to the profit the government is making out of signage. And in particular, once we add dynamic shocks, it really restricts the ability of the platform to smooth shocks by adjusting this trade-off between markups and signage revenue. And with multiple currencies, we have some competition between them on both markups and currency supply, but I don't currently have much of a characterization of that. Okay, so I was going to ask a question, do you find these trade-offs satisfactory? But I think I might pose that as a question for you to think about, given that I'm out of time. I think I can close off there. We're not going to talk about the extensions. And I'll just conclude and say, look, the point of this project is to kind of argue that we should really approach money and payments much more like an IO problem. We introduced and critiqued a simple model of platform money creation, and we really tried to draw out this trade-off the platform has about, does it really want to be a trading platform and get a lot of markup revenue, or does it really want to try to have a very liquid currency or a very valuable currency and get signage revenue where the currency is used a lot? Okay, I think that's it. Marcus, I'm out of time, right?
Yeah, so we can do the following. It's officially a break. If people want to talk to you and chat with you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to stay online and answer questions. I had to rush a little bit at the end, but that's because I had good questions earlier on that were more or less the questions I would have been trying to ask later on anyway. So, but I'm happy to.
But if people want to leave, it's fine too. Nobody should be obliged.
Yeah, I won't be offended if you don't want to talk. If it's
Jonathan, a quick question regarding the stable coin. I think the way you put it is interesting, because it seems to be that issuing stable coin is a bad business idea, right? Because
in this model, issuing a stable coin looks like a bad business idea, because the whole way I've set up this model is it's really the flexibility to get to, like, you want this flexibility. They're optimizing in some sense.
Yeah.
So I think I was going to say that when I ask, is this satisfactory? A lot of people want to issue stable coins. Yeah. So I think you might feel there's something missing here, because at the moment stable coins just look like a bad idea. And so I think the question is, well, what's missing that would make stable coins look better?
Exactly, and that missing ingredient, see here right now are like, you know, the basically the rents are being extracted just because there is this exogenous trading rate, which is stochastic and idiosyncratic, and that's why the platforms are able to extract rents, right? But in real world, if you think about Libra or Facebook, right, then more than this idiosyncratic stochastic rent story, what comes to the mind, why they want to use a stable coin, for example, is to lend some sort of credibility to their currency, right? In case you don't have a market, so in this case, probably money is not a bubble, right? Money has some tangible value, which is like, you know, every agent is optimizing their own respective problems. And the need for money just comes as a response to that, to hedge away this idiosyncratic risk.
I mean, you're insuring, I mean, if you think of insurance of idiosyncratic risk as a bubble, you have insurance of idiosyncratic risk here, I would say, right?
Sure.
I mean, liquidity-based models normally revolve around there's some kind of liquidity risk, and money plays the role of providing insurance against that liquidity risk. So in that sense, there's some value of money, because I mean, none of these monies are paying a flow dividend, right? They're only useful to the extent they're useful as for trading. So in that sense, they're all, they're bubble money in that sense. I guess there's a debate over what you really call bubble money. I mean, I think Marcus might be able to address that sort of comment. I think Marcus has a clearer view on what you wouldn't call a bubble money.
Yeah, I mean, my point was just that, like, you know, at least some agent in the economy is benefiting from the money, which is the intermediaries, the platforms.
Yes.
So it's not as if all the agents are like, you know, none of the agents are drawing anything from insurance.
You have in mind that like you view Libra as a currency that nobody would benefit from holding. Is that true? That might be why it hasn't been so successful. So I mean, yes, in this model there is there's always something you want to buy on the platform. So somebody always wants to buy something on the platform, and in that sense, that's what gives money a value. And yes, so people are not issuing a currency that is, I mean, yes. So I guess the currency is not circulating independent of having any kind of value in use for trade. In that sense, it doesn't look like, I guess, a Bitcoin or something like that. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's yeah, maybe that's separate to the it's a little bit separate to the well, I guess you're gonna say it's related to the idiosyncratic risk in the sense you always want to trade somewhere. Yeah, so I think that's true. I don't think that's, I mean, personally, I don't think that's the main reason that stable coins are popular. I think stable coins are more about issues of runs. And stability. So we don't have aggregate shocks here that could kind of destabilize the currency. So I think pegging is about an issue of kind of commitment to a certain kind of value and some kind of concern about, you know, doing things that lose credibility that cause some self-fulfilling price spiral, I think is more what people have in mind with stable coins, and we don't really have anything here that would look like that, I don't think.
So Jonathan, one point, your model gives a very good balance between this markup and signorage, right?
Yes.
But you started the model with the search cost, right? So the way the search cost impacts, does it impact in signorage or it impacts in markup?
Well, the search cost, I mean, as was the comment from the previous student, so the search cost is in some sense what's giving the demand for the money, right? Because, and the demand for the platform. So your search rate is partly idiosyncratic, which is why somebody always wants to hold each currency or needs each currency. And then secondly, it also gives the platform their advantage, right? So the platform has a better trading rate. Here that's exogenous, and they're trying to monetize that. So so it's not so much, it's really the platform is trying to make money out of the trading rate. That's really what I think is going on. That's the way that this trading rate enters.
Okay, because as the interpolative